Right, this is going to be the final reaction to 1899 since I've just watched episode 8, The Key. I just want to say a few words, trying to sort of clarify what I mentioned at the end of the previous reaction, because actually I had a bit of a brainwave which turns out to be correct. So I just want to try and simplify it. I was talking about Henry Singleton. It was after that blockbuster of an ending to episode 2, where you see the 9 television screens flush mounted into the wall of what turns out to be his study. And I sort of waffled on a bit, and I just want to try and clarify what I said there. So basically, we were given the false impression that Henry Singleton was in a position that's similar to ours. We're watching the series, we're watching this simulation unfold from the outside. And when we saw somebody watching these television screens, we sort of reached the conclusion that this person was in the same position as we were, that he or she was watching the events unfold on these 9 television screens, just in the same way that we were. But actually that's not correct. Henry Singleton is actually part of the simulation. He's part of the program just as much as all the other characters are. So that was a bit of a red herring, and like I say, it's confirmed by the events that transpire in episode 8. So let's begin at the beginning in terms of the boy waking up to that usual exhortation from Mora. What happens is we see him first of all with Mora in that Scottish landscape. I keep calling it that, but it's the landscape where the mental hospital is, and he's discovered the beetle, which we'll later refer to as the door-opening scarab. He's found this beetle, and he wants to put it in his tin, in his collection tin. Similar tin, I think, that Mora empties of tobacco or cigarettes in the captain's cabin when she traps the beetle. But Mora explains to the boy that it's not a good idea to keep him imprisoned in this sort of, this dark place. So he understands what she's saying to him and basically lets it go. But then he says to her, because she says, eventually I'll have to let you go as well, you'll become a man. And he says, oh no, I'll never leave you and Daddy. So anyway, he undergoes the usual process of, wake up. And it transpires that he actually wakes up on a sofa in his grandfather's study, in Henry Singleton's study. So we then switch to Captain Ike, who manages to climb aboard the Kerberos. He swims across or rows across from the Prometheus, in much the same way that Daniel appeared on the boat in one of the earlier episodes. The characters that remain on the Kerberos eventually realise that, or at least Mora gives them the clue that, look, you're in a simulation, this isn't real. And she triggers that by mentioning the fact that, how did you actually get on the boat? Do you remember actually going on board the boat, and they don't. And what's more, she brings out her letter, and everybody else brings out their letter. Virginia and all the rest of them. Possibly the only one that wouldn't bring out a letter is the stowaway. But anyway, that's a sort of a bit of a game changer. Although it's one of those things that it's difficult to actually comprehend. It's a bit like Katerina in Dark being told, your son is in the past, he's time travelled, all this kind of thing. And some of the characters just don't want to believe that they're in a simulation. They're basically going to get in the rowing boat and trying to make land somewhere else. So that's what happens on board the ship. What also happens is that Daniel hacks into the mainframe of the computer, or at least that's what we find out later. He attaches his little device via a cable to the main computer and is changing things. What he's changing, we find out later. Also, on the inside of the Kerberos, there's this black material that we've seen already, the sort of crystalline material, and it's growing at an alarming rate. You might, for example, see it as a kind of physical manifestation of a computer virus. That's actually what it is. And like I say, it's evolving and growing throughout the ship. So even when the characters try to leave the Kerberos, the interior is being reconfigured as a result of Daniel's sort of mucking around with the computer system, with the algorithms. He's changing things, so doors are no longer there. It's just a solid wall now. So they're frantically running around trying to find an exit, and the exits are rapidly closing. As for Ike and Maura, they managed to get almost inside the computer in the same way that Daniel did, amongst all the cabling, etc. And what happens is you get the siren wailing again, and it looks as if the whole thing is about to shut down at that point in time. What then happens is we switch to see Elliot again, the boy, with his grandfather, and his grandfather's explaining about what happened, and he basically he offers him the chance to understand what's going on, and takes him to the mental asylum. And when he's in the chair, the chair that's associated with Maura, he's injected in the neck with the hypodermic needle. But instead of the sort of black substance that was used with Maura, this time it's white. Okay, because this is going to reveal to him exactly what happened in the past. So what seems to have happened, or at least this is the impression that's given, is that Elliot was dying or about to die. That it's actually Maura who's tried to imprison him, has tried to keep him alive, obviously only artificially so, in this construct, in this simulation. That's the idea that Henry Singleton is trying to get across to Elliot. She'd actually read a version of Plato's allegory about the cave in Henry Singleton's office when she was a child. So that seems to have given her the idea, if you like, for what she does later as an adult. Meanwhile, on board the Kerberos, the remaining passengers, and there's obviously not many of them left now, they manage to escape from the boat because certain portals suddenly appear and open, and they end up in the different worlds, the fake worlds that we've already seen. For example, the world where Lucien and his antagonist, who's, I've forgotten his name, the Black Stowaway, where they were sort of fighting in the French Foreign Legion. They end up there, and all those worlds that you can see are all fake, they're glitching, and there's some nice touches here where, for example, characters end up using almost like submarine hatches to enter and to leave these particular fake worlds. Again, it's great use of video trickery to achieve these kind of effects. Now, what also happens is that the first mate gets the key from Mora, and after he does that, he apologizes. He apologizes to the captain and reverts back to German again. Es tut mir leid, Captain, and then turns him off. Uses the little handheld device just to deactivate him. Of course, Mora's devastated and is sort of, crouched over the captain. Bring him back. No, I've switched him off. That's it. That's the end of the captain. So Mora eventually meets with her father, and he says to her again, you're not asking the right questions. So she still hasn't understood what's going on. And in their conversation, there's an interesting passage where he talks about how some people are born as avoiders, whereas others are born as seekers. And obviously Mora is in the latter camp. She's a seeker, and being a seeker means that your life is always going to be tragic and full of misery and whatnot, because you're never going to be satisfied, you're never going to rest. And he drops the bombshell that it's actually Mora who is the creator. In fact, to be more precise, it's Mora and her husband and Daniel. But basically, she is the creator because she's come up with this program, and that is basically the explanation for why everything exists. This whole program exists because she was trying to keep her son alive, basically. So that's the bombshell that he drops at that moment in time. So she gets injected again, this time with the black substance, because Henry wants to put an end to things. He wants her to be shut down again, sort of trapped within that program. But what happens as a result of Daniel's mucking around with the mainframe is that he changes the code in the mainframe, and the simulation gets deleted. That's the important thing here. So it's no longer being sort of stored anywhere. It actually gets totally wiped away because of his his activities with the mainframe computer. He's changed the code. So what then happens is that Maura wakes up. She's lying in the landscape again now, outside. She's no longer inside the asylum. She's wearing her hospital gown still, and she's attracted. She goes towards the wooden cross again, which this time has like a ray of light streaming down upon it, and she goes and climbs down into the secret hidey hole, and what then happens is she meets up with Daniel, and Daniel has a child's pyramid in his hand. It's got the wake up written on it as well, and he explains to her what he's actually done, that he's changed the code, and basically he's given Henry Singleton the wrong pyramid. Okay, he's changed things around, so the pyramid that Henry Singleton's been given won't work. So when he puts the key inside it, nothing changes. Okay, whereas with the child's pyramid that Daniel has, all it requires is for Maura to put her wedding ring in. So the wedding ring is now the code that's required. It's the key that's required, and that's basically what she does. She basically puts the ring in, and after she's done that, the whole loop is broken. All those previous simulations no longer exist, and what we find is that, and this is another one of those cases, a bit like in Dark, where you get the reveal right at the end. What we find is that it was actually Kieran, who's Maura's brother, this sort of shadowy figure that we've never actually seen, that it was Kieran who has taken over the whole program, the whole simulation. So he's in effect now the one that was in charge of it. And what then happens is we get a switch scene now where we see Maura waking up again. But this time she's in an upright position. She's standing up. And she's was connected to some sort of device. But then we see her sort of standing up and stepping off a kind of platform where she's been. And we realise that there are other people surrounding her in this space. And to keep up the sort of Egyptian theme, they're in sort of containers which are a bit like the sort of sarcophagi that you would see an Egyptian pharaoh encased in. You know, the actual coffins that they were put in on their way to the afterlife. So it stresses that Egyptian theme, obviously, with the pyramids and with the scarab beetle. So what we then discover is Mora looks out of the porthole, and as she does so, we realise that she's actually on board a spaceship. It's a ship after all, except it's a spaceship. And it's actually called the Prometheus, a bit like in the Ridley Scott prequel to Alien. So at that moment in time, we get the musical cue, which is, of course, Starman by David Bowie, very appropriate, of course, in the circumstances. And there's a message that she receives, which links back to one of the earlier episodes. I can't remember which one it was now, but it's that one about may your coffee kick in before reality does. Yeah, may your coffee kick in before reality does. And the message is, of course, from Kieran, the brother. And it turns out that the year that's given in terms of the message that she receives, the year that's quoted is 2099. It gives the date as well. I think it's something like 21st of October 2099, which is, of course, 200 years exactly compared to the opening scene of 1899. You know, where Mora gives the date. I think she says it's the October 21st, 1899. So that's the end of 1899, or should that be 2099? Okay, so a few final thoughts on that, because the first thing you're going to be wondering is this just another simulation? Okay, who's to say that this spacecraft is just not another version of the Kerberos and the Prometheus, the boats? It could quite well be. And the characters that we see in those little sort of life support systems, you'd probably call them sort of sleep pods, are some familiar faces that we've seen from the boat. I think Cresta is in there, but he doesn't have his disfigurement to his face. So, like I say, you see some of the characters that we've already seen from the Kerberos. But that's the thing that you're going to be wondering straight away. Is this just not another simulation created by somebody else? Who knows? As for the series, is it as good as Dark? No, it's not as good as Dark, but I mean, Dark is an absolute masterpiece. If you look at Dark and look at all the areas, it just scores highly in every single area that you would care to examine. So if you looked at the acting, for example, you looked at the casting, which is just stellar. You look at the storyline. You look at the cinematography. You look at the audio and the musical cues that are used in it. In all those areas, it just gets 10 out of 10. It's absolutely brilliant. So obviously, 1899 is, you know, it's not going to reach those kind of levels, and it doesn't. But it's still a very, very good piece of drama. Thoroughly recommend watching it. And I imagine that there will be another series. I think that's pretty obvious. I don't think it's going to end where it does. Um, you look at the acting in it. The little boy who plays Elliot is terrific. Obviously, Captain Ike. We've seen him before. Andreas Peachman. He's a great actor. The special effects in it are superb. The use of this so-called volume technology with like a 180-degree panoramic sort of view is perfect to represent the sort of backdrop to the ship. So all this stuff is it's all praiseworthy, and I've thoroughly enjoyed watching it. Probably will end up rewatching it at some time, but I thought it would be interesting to put on record my reaction, which is, like I said, totally blind. I've not read up on it. I've not had any spoilers, any major spoilers. And it's been interesting to see what I got right, what I got wrong, because I'm the sort of typical, the average viewer, I suppose. And so, if I've seen things and spotted things, I'm sure other people have also, and have probably understood it better than I have. But I just wanted to put it on record and just do a full reaction to a series, and now I've achieved that. So I'm really chuffed. I mean, I was always interested in 1899 for another reason, because I've written a screenplay myself, which is called Blood Ritual, and it's a sort of mashup of Jack the Ripper and a character that's basically a relative of Dracula. So it's Dracula plus Jack the Ripper, and it's set in Victorian London. It's set in London in the 1890s. So those kind of boats, feature in that screenplay, because at the end of the screenplay, two of the characters are making their way towards America. So that was one of the other reasons why I thought it would be interesting to watch it. Anyway, I think that is all I've got to say for the time being. So I hope what I've said has been of interest to people, and at least I've put on record my thoughts about this particular program. It's a very solid achievement. It's one that I thoroughly recommend that you watch. Anyway, that's the end of the reaction. So have fun, folks.